Families in pro wrestling.
Brother.
There have been a lot of them, both in the ring and behind the scenes. But sometimes the family connections in pro wrestling haven't been as close as fans thought they were. Sometimes not close at all. So, here's 5 fabricated families in pro wrestling. Number 1, Lance Von Erich. One of the best-known fabricated relatives in pro wrestling, the name Lance Von Erich had been mentioned on World Class Championship Wrestling television as far back as 1983. Lance was a cousin to the Von Erich brothers and the son of Fritz's brother Waldo Von Erich. In 1985, more than a year and a half after David Von Erich's death and with Mike Von Erich recovering from near-death due to toxic shock syndrome, world-class fans finally got to see Lance in the flesh. A good-looking, muscular fellow that didn't make it too hard to believe he was related to Dallas's favorite sons, Lance still immediately raised a few eyebrows. It wasn't long before the illusion was shattered. Lance Von Erich was actually William Kevin Vaughn, who wrestled as Ricky Vaughn in the Pacific Northwest. World Class covered his time as Ricky Vaughn by saying he wanted to make it on his own without using the family name. Problem is, William Kevin Vaughn was actually from the Dallas area and was an accomplished high school athlete and bodybuilder. Many people in the crowd immediately knew he was not related to the Von Erichs, much less Waldo's son, who incidentally was not really Fritz's brother. A falling out with the Von Erichs after about a year and a half led to his departure, and Fritz Von Erich doing the unthinkable by breaking kayfabe and admitting on TV Lance was not a real cousin to his sons. The whole thing left a bad taste in the mouth of world-class fans. Number 2, the Valiant Brothers. When Jerry Valiant was introduced to the WWF fans as a brother to Jimmy and Johnny in 1979, most of them weren't fooled. Jerry had been wrestling in the Northeast U.S. and Canada for a number of years under various names, most recently as Mad Dog Mitchell. Jimmy and Johnny had arguably been the top heel tag team in the WWF through the 1970s, and it wasn't likely a third brother hadn't at least been mentioned in the last 5 years. To boot, Jerry was actually the oldest of the 3. Indeed, Jerry Valiant's real name was John Hill, a native of Hamilton, Ontario, who had made his debut in 1960 as Guy Hill in the AWA. The thing is, even Jimmy and Johnny weren't really brothers. Johnny was actually Thomas Sullivan, and began his career under the name Johnny Sullivan, wrestling in various promotions. By the time he settled in the WWF in 1969, he was using the name John L. Sullivan. In late 1970, Sullivan left the WWF and traveled through territories in California, Texas, and Japan, before landing in the Indiana-based WWA in 1973, where he was billed as the brother of Jimmy Valiant, who also wasn't named Valiant. Jimmy's real name is James Fanning, and began his career under the name Jimmy Valentine in the mid-1960s. He began using the name Valiant during a Texas run in 1970, where Johnny Valentine was already established. For the record, Johnny Valentine is also not his brother. Number 3, Sammy and Ricky Steamboat. As many viewers of this channel will tell you, Ricky Steamboat began his career using his real name Richard Blood. Tito Santana used it too. Stop it. Actually, Steamboat was most often billed in the AWA as Dick Blood, but yikes. A natural in the ring with a great look, Blood broke into wrestling in the mid-1970s and immediately started turning heads among promoters and bookers. When Blood traveled to Florida in May 1976, Florida promoter Eddie Graham planned to push for him and wanted to rename him based on his resemblance to Sammy Steamboat, who was a popular figure in Florida in the late 1960s. Graham changed Blood's name to Ricky Steamboat and billed him as Sammy's nephew. Sammy had been wrestling in his native Hawaii since leaving Florida in April of 1970 and never got the chance to meet his wrestling namesake. Sammy did write Ricky a letter when the younger Steamboat began appearing in the Mid-Atlantic territory in 1977, telling him he had heard good things about him and was happy Ricky was carrying the name with respect. Ricky did have a real brother that wrestled under the name Vic Steamboat in the 1980s and 90s. Among other promotions, Vic appeared in Florida, World Class, and the CWA, even winning the CWA Heavyweight Championship in 1993. Ricky's son also wrestled, originally under the name Ricky Steamboat Jr., but that was changed to Richie Steamboat when he started a long stretch in WWE's developmental brand in 2010. Number 4, the Fabulous Fargos. Few wrestlers have the universal love and respect Jackie Fargo has in Memphis, Tennessee. Like most wrestlers, Jackie didn't start out in the territory that made him famous, but was traveling between the Carolinas and New York under the names Honey Boy Fargo and Wildman Fargo in the early 1950s. While in the Northeast in 1957, Fargo began teaming with Don Stevens, who was already known as the brother of Ray Stevens. While the two were successful, their careers didn't really start to take off until they moved to the Mid-America territory and began being billed as brothers Jackie and Don Fargo. Many have said the Fargos were ahead of their time and are held in high regard to this very day. Funny thing is, Don Fargo, the former Don Stevens, wasn't Ray Stevens' brother either. Don was born in Germany and began his wrestling career in the Tri-State Territory in 1954 under his real name Don Colt. During a quick swim through Detroit, Don befriended Ray Stevens, and the two became kayfabe brothers when they traveled together through Pennsylvania and Ohio in 1956 and 57. In 1959, a third Fargo brother was added, but he was an actual brother to Jackie. Roughhouse Sonny Fargo quickly earned a reputation of being the wildest of the Fargo brothers, but also had the shortest career. Sonny retired in 1983, while Don had his last match in 1987. Jackie appeared sporadically into the 1990s, and even in a six-man tag match in 2004. Number 5. The Andersons. Okay, hold on to your hat. The Andersons, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, one of the legendary families in pro wrestling history, and none of them are actually related. It started with Gene Anderson, who began his career in the AWA in the late 1950s. When Gene moved on to the Mid-America territory in 1966, he was joined by another AWA wrestler named Larry Hanimi, who had actually faced Gene in several matches over the years. Because of a passing resemblance, the two were presented as brothers, with Larry taking the name Lars Anderson. By 1968, the Andersons had moved on to the Carolinas and Jim Crockett Promotions. They were proving to be such a big draw, Crockett added another brother, Alan Rogowski, who had been wrestling under the name Rock Rogowski in the AWA. He was redubbed Ole Anderson. Flash forward to 1983, and Gene was approaching retirement, while Lars was on his way to NWA Polynesian in Hawaii. A young wrestler named Marty Lund had been spotted in the Mid-South Territory working as enhancement talent. With a striking resemblance to Ole, Lund was brought in as a cousin and renamed Arn Anderson. Add to all this, Ric Flair was also recognized as a cousin to the Andersons, making Charlotte Flair an extension of the kayfabe Anderson family. Plus, Ole's son Bryant had a brief career in the 1990s, Gene's son Brad had a 20-year career in wrestling, and Arn's son Brock makes appearances with AEW and wrestles on the indie circuit. Brock sometimes tags with C.W. Anderson, who is not really related. Everything old is new again. Well, I hope you enjoyed this kayfabe edition of 5 Things. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, check out the 5 Things playlist, or check out one of the other videos on the channel. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, not necessarily in that order, and I will see you next time.